The problems facing New Zealand's primary sector have been mounting at a rapid pace. So I think it's time for open hearts and open minds. Welcome to Sarah's Country for tonight, which is first of our special editions, which we will be introducing to you. And what a way to kick off with the deep dive into the mysterious dark hole that is today's budget. Today's budget described as a 1 in 100 year budget. This is a moment in history for us all that we will be working together closely in a monumental task of getting back to pre-COVID prosperity. I'm your host, Sarah Perriam, for this special Sarah's Country Budget Edition. And for those new to the show tonight, thank you for taking the time to step into our world. This is where we have a strong, passionate community that listen and watch either live or on demand, and it's built on sharing wisdom and hope in the food and fibre sector of New Zealand. Today's budget announcement from Finance Minister Grant Robertson was always about stepping in to turn the tap on. We understand that. But journalists and commentators like myself have been standing, of course, waiting by the faucet to see who was going to get wet and who was going to be left out in the dry. There are many ways that you can look at this budget, dependent on, of course, your situation, political leaning, industry you work in, your experience and knowledge. So as I seek in Sarah's Country, of course, it's always about open hearts and open minds about what is in front of us. This budget has two elements to it, of course. The immediate short-term importance of plugging the dramatic rise in unemployment from 4% to predicted 10%, and the sustainable announcement of another 8 weeks of the wage subsidy to targeted businesses, as well as the $1 billion to create jobs in nature and $1.6 billion in training, including free apprenticeships, has all been very much welcomed. But waving over here, government. We're short on 50,000 people needed in the primary sector, and that's not a new thing. Whether it's been redeploying university-educated Green voters to fill the large gaping hole of on-farm environment auditors needed, or the clever creative brand and marketing people from the tourism sector redeployed to position New Zealand's food and fibre as the best in the world, or our baristas from our closed coffee shops that can go from swinging on a coffee machine to on the cups or the handpiece, waving. You know, that industry that brings in $46.5 billion a year in export revenue. Grant Robertson preached the words that would make any Labour voter weep today. Labour saved us going out of the Great Depression. National turned to the free market after the 87 stock market crash, and look where that got us. This will not happen on my watch, he said. There are many things that I can be critical about the slush fund, as National Party finance spokesman Paul Goldsmith has described it today, moving our debt to GDP ratio from under 20% to 54%. And Robertson said, don't worry, we'll be fine. We'll be back at 4% unemployment in a couple of years. Robertson will be fine as he has an unallocated $20 billion of the $50 billion earmarked as a must-spend into the next 4 months prior to the election. But there are a lot of positives, of course. The devil is, of course, in the detail and how that will be targeted. I do really love the idea of 200,000 children having free lunch in this country. I do want New Zealand to be the best country in the world to be a child. I want the redistribution of our wealth to be done through the product of our national identity, food. But why not throw in a side of agricultural education with that as well? There's great news on throwing $5 billion into 8,000 homes to make them warmer and drier. If that means a big government purchase order of wool carpets and wool insulation, as I wouldn't dare imagine Jacinda would want Neve to be crawling around on petrol, let alone our most vulnerable children. And of course, that goes for Gareth Hughes, big campaigner on animal welfare. So he would be happy to know that it would go to cover the costs of shearing sheep for animal welfare purposes. I'm excited about this special edition of Sarah's Country, bringing you our budget coverage for 2020 in alliance with the great team of analysts, journalists and the wider partners of Global HQ. So let's get into unpacking what is, and more importantly, what wasn't in the budget with our guest tonight. So who is coming up in our show? Please, I want all the comments below for our guests. Megan, sorry, I've got two Megans. Megan in the UK, she sees them all. She gathers them all and puts them together on this fax machine here so that I can make sure I've got the questions for our guests from you, live, interactive tonight. And we're going to kick off the show with our industry leaders panel, Tim Mackle, CEO of DairyNZ, and Sam McIvor, CEO of Beef and Lamb New Zealand, who will join us to go through this detail of this budget and where it could land with the wish list that we had going into this budget: improved rural connectivity, expenditure into water storage projects, agriculture, education and career development, improving rural health and infrastructure. There certainly was support for environmental management and biodiversity and biosecurity. Much welcome $500 million pinned to the primary sector. So get your questions below and we'll put them to Tim and Sam as well. The Green Party were the big winners in today's budget, but so was every farmer across the country that would love a hand to plant a tree. Jobs in Nature campaign was unleashed, and we will cover off what this will mean for pest eradication, water quality and Indigenous biodiversity with ECAN councillor Megan Hands. I also want to ask Megan about the lack of detail on infrastructure in regional New Zealand and what she's hearing about the pending policy announcements, all that after 7:30. And to close the show, we have the respected independent economist Cameron Bagri joining us to take your questions, and let's talk over chew through this colossal debt level that we face and how the hell are we going to pay it back. I really want your questions for Cameron, as our last time we ran out of time as so many came in. So tonight I have allowed plenty of time with Cameron. So right now we're going to cross over to our panel after this great on-farm story produced by Global HQ.
This is Sarah's Country.
In a modern world, there's more technologies, there's more stresses. We've got apps and phones, and a breakfast isn't a mindful experience now. A breakfast is probably a couple of phone calls and a few emails, and that's taking away from our enjoyment we probably used to have on farms. It's about actively choosing to get back to that state of making farming a mindful experience. I'm Mark Olsen, I'm a dairy farmer and I'm an athlete in Koringa. We're milking 250 cows here on a 94 hectare platform in Koringa, just out of Palmerston North, running a pretty simple low cost System 2 dairy farm here, focusing on pasture based milk production, trying to get maximum production per cow and per hectare in a sustainable fashion. In my spare time I'm heavily focused on triathlon and multi-sport, participating in coast to coast when I can and various sort of half Ironmans and Ironman distance. Just starting to take it more seriously recently.
36-year-old Mark Olsen, you are an Ironman, Mark. 226K.
My first season on this farm, I was probably heavily burnt out. No days off, just constantly grinding on the farm, and then it was a case of what's it going to take to keep me here long term, and if I overcomplicate it or create a stressful system, then am I going to be leaving in 10 years' time? It's something that I'm very mindful of to have longevity in the industry. By default, it's a low-cost system. It's proving sustainable, it's proving profitable, expenses are low, just focusing on what's important, which is the cows, the grass and the pasture, which are things I'm passionate about, but not overcomplicating it. I'm definitely interested in pushing the farm forward, but I think it's going to come through genetic gains, tweaking the herd, rather than trying to push more and more supplement into an average cow. If things are running well, cows are happy, I'm like, okay, I can fit in a training session, let's go. A lot of my best decisions are actually now happening while I'm training, because you're giving yourself freedom to think about what needs to happen on farm and how your business wants to progress. It's a great way to keep your mental health in check, keep your physical body in check, and therefore enhances my business as well. People are starting to realise that life's short and you need to fill your own cup first. We're all sort of given this body and it's made to be in nature, it's made to be exercising and moving, and by competing in these sorts of events such as triathlon or multi-sport, it's expressing that. I highly recommend everyone engage in it. Get out there and move.
Right, let's get straight into our panel in the respective time tonight. Welcome to Ceres Country, CEO of DairyNZ Tim Mackle and CEO of Beef and Lamb New Zealand, Sam McIvor. Firstly, I'll start with you, Tim. What's your initial take from DairyNZ's position on today's budget?
Hi, Sarah and Sam. Good to see you both. Look, I think the budget's focus on jobs, infrastructure, and the environment really has hit the spot. At the end of the day, though, the devil will be in the detail, and I guess like a lot of budgets when they're released at this time of year, there is a lot more detail to come, so we're keen to see that and be part of shaping that as well. But overall, look, it looks really positive.
Sam, from Beef and Lamb New Zealand's perspective, has the government been listening to your wish list to nurture our biggest export earner of the primary sector?
Listen, the way that I sort of see it at the moment, Sarah, it looks like it's a bit of a triage situation. So the first thing is fix the issues that we have with losing jobs, and there's a focus on our primary sector with that, which is good. I guess the second area will be rebuild the economy, and that's yet to come out, and I'm going to be really, really interested to see what's in there. And obviously, as a primary sector, we're jointly advocating for some key things in there.
Okay, so let's start working through some of those key things. I want to start with you both on the short-term economic stimulus that can reduce this blow of sharply rising unemployment. Tim, DairyNZ has recently launched a positive initiative in this space. Can you tell us about that and, of course, what funding has been announced under the budget that you have been able to wrap your head around?
Yeah, so look, I mean, we're all faced with short-term acute challenges, none more so than tourism, hospitality, but in our sector and dairy in particular, we've got issues around getting animals processed through works, which actually is a linkage we've got with Sam as well. But the big issue around is people. So, in the dairy sector, we've got over 30,000 people on farms, and we have a little over 5,000 people as migrant workers at any one time, and so it's a big number. Clearly, with the disruptions to the borders right now, it means at this time of year when we're bringing more people into New Zealand, getting ready for the next season, that's been disrupted, as it has for a lot of sectors that bring people in. But ours is quite a big number. So on that basis, there is quite a gap to fill potentially. Even if we were to extend the visas of everyone who is here now, we'd still potentially be at least 1,000 people short. Right now, as it happens, there are 1,000 jobs in the market. We've just worked with MPI and working with MSD as well, working with the government, which is great, on a program to bring unemployed, those who find themselves unfortunately unemployed right now, into a training program for about three weeks in June, give them some practical skills, some theory, and get them on farm as well, get them ready to get into employment, and then match farmers up with that. So, look, we're really excited about that initiative, and it's just a start, and we need to work collectively across all sectors.
Good timing with calving coming up, Tim. Yeah, Sam, let's talk about the lifeline being ripped out of the agricultural education sector that we've seen under this government's term. I mean, I'm referring to Taratahi and Telford and of course what needs that we have to be invested to bring people through into the sheep and beef sector.
Yeah, I think the key will be really the chain here, and that is firstly attracting people, secondly the ability to train people, and then thirdly the ability to support them once they get into employment, whether it's on our farms or in our processing companies. So for me, the 14.9 million or the 19 million, so to speak, is really positive, but actually we've really got to work to make sure that chain works. As a sector, we're the largest manufacturing sector, employing 92,000 people. Most of our shortages are tied up with processing works, and as Tim alluded to, the visa situation, the immigration situation is a real pinch point at the moment. So it is very much going to be around that, if you want to describe it, the value chain of attracting people and getting them successfully into jobs.
Crossing over to the environment spend, $1.1 billion, and part of that was the jobs in nature. Sam, that's a positive for a lot of the work that you've been doing with Taste Pure Nature and the flow-on effect to our added value products as well?
Yeah, listen, there's no doubt that farmers are committed to making environmental change on their farms, and that has a significant cost. I know both Tim and ourselves have done a lot of analysis really around some of the proposed government policies and what the cost of that change would be on farm. Listen, I just want to premise this by saying actually there's still some work to be done to get the government policies right in the first place. And so we've got some work to do to still advocate on that and make sure that that's right. But by the same token, the support that the government is offering here, whether it's biodiversity planting on farm, whether it might be helping to fence, to plant trees, pest control, et cetera, all of those things are really positive.
Absolutely. Of course, devil in the detail when it comes to the cash, but definitely, Tim, it's about the policy. We talk a lot on Sarah's Country around uncertainty and the woes that brings. We just would love some certainty around this policy that's pending for now too long.
Yeah, absolutely. And echo Sam's sentiments here. This really positive announcement today, $1 billion, $400 million for regional environment programs like wetlands. So we have potential with some of these initiatives to actually reduce the loading, on our productive sectors, which could help New Zealand, not just farmers, by actually getting more juice out of the orange, so to speak, with less environmental impact. So that's what we should be aspiring to. So that's positive. But Sam's right. There's still a huge policy piece on the table. And I guess the primary sector in general are not happy with the original proposal. These initiatives are great, but at the same time, our forecasting economic modelling suggests that, the proposal as stands could still cost us $80 billion out to 2050 cumulatively. So those numbers are pretty big too. So we've got to get both initiatives right. These positive things on the ground, and also the policy piece, as Sam said.
Wow, 80 billion. Hopefully there's some economic sense when the policy starts to be refined and then released, but you never know. Infrastructure, let's cross to that. There will be a major stimulus of improving productivity in the environmental management of our food and fibre if it's allocated into strategic projects in regional New Zealand. Sam, are you disappointed that there wasn't something specific in the announcement around water storage and reticulation?
Yeah, I guess to a certain extent, Sarah, I expect that to come in the next round. But yes, well, my expectation is that we will see that. If we think about one of the most limiting factors in New Zealand agriculture right now is the availability and use of water. And so that's also a deficiency that we have for our urban centres, for that matter. So for me, firstly, I'm really interested in us understanding our water resources. At the same time, I'm really interested in this understanding our soil resources as well. In New Zealand at the moment, we haven't fully mapped all of our soils. And if you think about those two critical things for productivity, it's soil and water. So my expectation is, yes, understanding our water resources. Secondly, infrastructure around it. And listen, irrigation has been a dirty word, but it is still a tremendous, tremendous opportunity for New Zealand agriculture. So my expectation and my desire is to see that back on the table, but in a way that works, I guess, in tandem with our environmental footprint.
Tim?
Yeah, look, again, agree with Sam. Always agree with Sam, right, Sam? I think $3 billion investment in infrastructure is welcome for New Zealand. And I guess while the dollars are there, the details not just yet. And so, look, we're keen, DairyNZ, along with our partners, to engage with the government in the coming months to ensure really that the project's important to farmers, like water storage, Sam mentioned, rural broadband, mobile, and COVID, of course, the lockdown has really underscored how crucial that is to rural areas, not just urban areas, that they are priorities. It's not just all spent on the urban areas. And so, and the other thing, Sarah, is we've got to ensure that, any investment as a country is strategic, and I'm sure the government are wanting to do that too, that it's got a long-term vision that will pay dividends for years to come, whether it be economic or environmental benefits, because at the end of the day, look, our kids are going to be paying for this stuff too, so they deserve to see the benefits in their time as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally understand that completely. Just lastly, I want to close a comment from both of you around the morale out there with your farmer levy payers and a word to them about getting through this, because what a way to go out the other side and then get taxed heavily to pay it all back.
Yeah, I must say, Sarah, as I reflect on the last how many weeks it's been, I suppose 8 weeks or so now, I've been tremendously proud of our sector, and for two reasons really. One is we've been asked as a sector to stand up on behalf of New Zealand. We've had the privilege of continuing to operate, but we've been asked to stand up and really do our job. And to a person, I've been absolutely proud of the way that our farmers have stood up, and to our processors as well, who have actually, Tim's alluded to, we've still got challenges around dealing with some stock on farm, but our processors have done an outstanding job, and particularly in what I guess is a market internationally that's in turmoil, their agility around shifting markets has been just tremendous. And I think too the way that our industry has reached out to urban communities, shown some empathy and some care, and just the practical steps they've taken to support urban New Zealanders has been great too.
Yeah, and Tim, I just want to say congratulations. We've been playing it a lot on Serious Country, the wonderful video that DairyNZ put out as well.
Oh yeah, thanks, Sarah. Look, I think it just reflects the fact, as Sam said, there's a lot of quiet pride out there, from farmers feeling like they are making a difference. I mean, at the end of the day, most farmers, and Sam and I both grew up on farms. Our families are doing that. They do what they do because they believe in it and they feel good about producing food, working with animals and the land and water, all that stuff. So the last few years have been pretty tough in terms of challenging their values, and the fact that we're actually doing something pretty special. And I think a time like this highlights how special producing food really is. So they're getting on with it with quiet resolve, and that's what we need to do if things get a bit rockier in the next little while.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join us, CEO of DairyNZ Tim Mackle and CEO of Beef and Lamb Sam McIvor, both off to have their dinner now after what would have been a big day. Thank you, gentlemen, for taking the time to join us. Now, coming up next on Serious Country, I want to ask ECAN Councillor Megan Hands about this $1.1 billion being poured into nature. And is Simon Bridges correct in saying this budget was just a disguised way for the government to get major money into their pet projects while leaving us in colossal debt?
This is Serious Country.
Every morning, Kiwi farmers wake up to produce high quality food. Yet, every night, some Kiwi families are going to sleep hungry. Meet the Need is a charity founded by farmers, and it's here to change all that. We're about New Zealand farmers feeding New Zealand families by donating a small part of what we grow when we can. You can help us make sure no one in New Zealand goes to sleep hungry again. Visit meettheneed.org and follow us on social.
Everyone's been talking about food these days.
While we've been busy stacking shelves, there's a whole team behind us.
But it's hard work too.
And we don't grow it without help.
Nutritious food needs nutrients. Our soil tells us that story.
By testing, we know what the soil needs.
We make the nutrients right here in New Zealand.
And we've got it
when you need it.
And we get it to where it needs to go.
As farmers, we have a really important role in turning sunshine and water and nutrients into an edible product, and we don't take that lightly.
It's great to know we're putting food on the New Zealand dinner table.
So we can all come together.
We've got to play our part in keeping the farmers growing what they grow, whether it be grass or fruit and vegetables.
Pleased to be part of the production line that keeps the industry moving and keeps people being fed.
I have been speaking to a farmer and they appreciate what we're doing.
They're really happy that at this critical time of the year for their autumn applications, our stores and supply networks have stayed open.
You're proud and privileged to be part of the team.
Thanks for the hard work, team. Let's dig in. And let's do it all again tomorrow. Cheers.
Thank you so much, Ravensdown, for supplying that very wonderful and inspiring video. Some lots of familiar faces there. Especially love seeing how the wee bitty wood head is getting on down there in South Otago. Very cute. Now, the prosperity of the Mid-Canterbury district stems from the 67-kilometre long Rangitata diversion race, known as the RDR, which started from humble beginnings with workers using picks, shovels and wooden wheelbarrows in its development in Mid-Canterbury in 1937, following the Great Depression. It has gone on to supply water to the district's plains and helping to generate social and economic benefits to Mid-Canterburyans, from the people on the land to those in the towns and villages. Will this budget be the equivalent of that, where our economic prosperity into our future is from a green economy, the way that we produce our food and fibre, built by investing now in nature? I'm joined by ECAN councillor and all-round commentator on agribusiness and the environment, Megan Hans. Good evening, Megan.
Hi, Sarah. How are you?
Thank you for taking the time to join us, talking about watching little ones grow up. I'm enjoying watching your little one grow up. How are you getting on being a mum in lockdown and being an ECAN councillor?
It's been very busy times. We have been doing council meetings all online, and you'll appreciate that's difficult anyway. But when you've got a little one who's learned to crawl at your feet, it's also adds another complication.
Nothing you can't handle, I know, Megan. Now, firstly, what do you make of this budget?
I think there's probably carrying on from the theme that Tim and Sam had a little bit before me, talking about the devil will be in the detail. I think there's obviously a lot of spending here. It looks like the Greens to me have got some good wee wins here in terms of getting some of this green spending in here. And the infrastructure spend is something I'm really interested in, but we don't yet know where that might go and what that might look like. So it remains to be seen what decisions those ministers will make there.
The two actually can go very well hand in hand. I had a lovely interview the other day with Mark Pisey from the Central Plains Water, and explaining the environmental improvements from bringing both together. Do you yet believe that this current government can understand how that can work?
I think there is hope for that. I think it's we'll sort of see as the detail comes through. I wouldn't be pinning huge amounts of hope on seeing a reimagining of the likes of the RDR on this government. I think for me, you're more likely to see projects that look a little bit more about climate change and putting a natural infrastructure lens over other big pieces of infrastructure. I think if you look at the shovel-ready projects that the likes of the infrastructure New Zealand guys like Mark Binns and the likes have looked at, they're very much talking about other infrastructure, and we know there is other infrastructure throughout New Zealand that is sorely in need of upgrade. So I would pick that it would go there rather than into big water storage projects. But I think there's room for both.
Okay, so talking about things like pest eradication, a pet project of Eugenie Sage's, and wilding pines, of course, the end of tenure review, another pet project of Eugenie Sage's. Do I need to continue? This says, and there is a lot here that has been an opportunity to sink the funds in that they have wanted for a long time.
I think that's true. There's some really good potential for projects here. I mean, you just have a quick look through what that $1 billion for environmental funds is. I think we'd be silly to criticise this as being about pet projects. We know that we need to have some investment into our natural environment, but we also know that when we invest in the natural environment, you've got to work in closely with the willing. So working with the willing, working with the sector, working with the landowners that are in that space to really get the best bang for buck you possibly can. And I think that probably lines up a little bit with where Tim and Sam were earlier as well, around getting those policy settings right. If there's some funds here and some opportunities here to do some really good stuff around planting, around pest control, around creating jobs as well, I think it's really important that we make this $1 billion work the best we possibly can for both the environment and also for our economies, rural and urban.
We are of similar age, Megan, and they talk about the next generation paying this off. We sit nicely in there, and I worry about my parents' retirement and all those sorts of things as well. Are you concerned about the length of time this is going to take for us to get back to the sort of good old days of 2019. I mean, from 87, it really wasn't until sort of early mid 2000s that we really started to have some good times.
Look, yeah, I am really concerned. You'll know me in terms of where my head will be at with that stuff. I think the glimmer of hope in this is the environmental projects. We're looking at intergenerational debt here. We have some intergenerational debt in terms of our natural environment, and if we can start to make some more moves in that space with some of the debt that we're taking on, I think that's really important, and I think that's a good thing to do. As long as all of this money is spent wisely, and it's about government departments that have received this money working really closely with local councils like ourselves, with your docs, your iwis, with your community groups and your landowners, we can make this work. But for me, it's really, really important that you get those partnerships going, work really collaboratively. This is my personal view in terms of how all of this plays out. But I think that in Canterbury, we're getting so good at collaboration in terms of working across those groups and stakeholders. I'd like to see that happen elsewhere throughout the country as well, because I think there is good potential here, but it's not going to be about how the government creates it. It's going to be about how the government partners with everybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was in Grant Robertson's speech today about those partnerships with not only the private sector, but also local government. And of course, Environment Canterbury have had a good track record of that sort of collaboration, of course, with the stakeholders on the ground as well. Talking about biosecurity, 500 million of that, there was a lot probably pegged on either M-Bovis eradication. You'd be happy about that?
Yeah, from my perspective, in terms of putting my industry hat on there, I am happy about that. You'll know that I have kept a close watch on the mycoplasma situation. There's no point in starting a job and not finishing it and not working through that. So I'm glad to see there's still some funding there for that. Yeah,
absolutely. So this is $500 million, and there's quite a bit focused on the ETS as well. Do you think that there's a lot of sort of helicopter funds, yet we haven't really defined science to make sure this is strategically spent?
Yeah, I think, again, the devil's going to be in the detail. If you flick through the budget document, and it is lengthy, there's a couple of different lines in there that sort of piqued my attention in that space around emissions trading scheme, but also around that investment in the greenhouse gas research with the Agricultural Greenhouse Gas Centre and other science projects. I am a science nerd. I would have liked to see even more science and innovation spend, but hey, look, we can't have everything in a situation like this, and we just have to make the dollar go as far as we possibly can.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, our sector has been in a good position for a long time, and there is a lot of industries that are certainly a lot worse off than us. There's a lot of countries that were coming from a debt loading level far higher than us. I mean, I'd hate to be in the States right now. I mean, in terms of helicopter cash, she's the only...
Yeah, it's pretty scary. For me, it's a really scary situation for the whole world. When you're looking at those GDP figures that are looking at, we're not even talking about recession type figures. They're looking, and Cam will talk more about this after me, I'm sure, with far more detail and far more knowledge in economics than I could ever possibly have. But I think it's really important that we do give thanks for the previous finance ministers that we've had, but also think about where this could be a sort of a little bit of... Robertson talked about a reset today, and I think people get a little bit scared by that. And for me, I see that as an opportunity. The whole world is going through this massive crisis. It's going to be a huge economic crisis as well as the health crisis it's been. But every crisis presents an opportunity. And so I think instead of being really down and depressed about the situation we're in, let's pick ourselves up by our bootstraps, do what we absolutely do best, and make the best we possibly can out of it. And I think we absolutely need to all work together on that, no matter what our political stripes are.
Megan, what a wonderful way to leave that, because I think the quote that was circulated around the team on the first week when we were all freaking out was, "Don't waste a good crisis." And I tell you what, Sarah's Country didn't waste a good crisis in terms of what's come out of it. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. It's Megan Hands, ECAN counsellor, and as I said, all-round great agribusiness and environment, excuse me, I'm jumping over words, commentator. Right, next up on Sarah's Country, we get to spend some quality time talking about the specifics of this monumental budget with, as Megan said, Cameron Bagri up next. I want your questions in the live below to get to Cameron, so don't be shy.
This is Sarah's Country.
Aotearoa, New Zealand has always been a land that has provided for its people, a land of abundance and opportunity. Our dedicated team at Ag Research know that embracing kaitiakitanga will see this continue for future generations. The work we do is transforming the way we farm and revolutionising the way New Zealanders care for our animals and for our land. We work hard to create the world's most desirable food and bio-based products through smart, sustainable farming, led by some of the world's most phenomenal research and informed by the consumers who benefit from this passion. Through a focus on environmental sustainability and climate change initiatives, this passion will allow our work to continue for generations to come. Our proficiencies in research run wide, from seeds to pest control, high-value food production to practical farming systems and quality assurance. From the smallest rural land use project to international research programs, our science and technology innovations drive the prosperity of our precious agricultural sector. It's through this research that New Zealand retains its position as a scientifically advanced global agricultural leader. Our commitment to the growth of our wider New Zealand economy, its people, and the kaitiakitanga of Aotearoa is at the very heart of every scientific innovation and creation we deliver. Ag Research, firmly grounded in this land, these waters, looking to what's in the stars and the future. Ata matai, matai whetu.
Right, I'm not quite sure if my maths is correct, and our next guest will certainly probably point me correctly, but I saw a $50 billion budget where 1% of it was tagged to an industry that brings in $46.5 billion in export earnings a year. That is all I can go off, as there is, of course, not many specifics around the infrastructure spending, environmental support on farm, job training, etc. That's extra to that, which the primary sector welcomes, that it can have a slice of. So to talk numbers, we're joined now by economist Cameron Bagri on a day that probably, I don't know whether it's like Christmas or not, economists poring over and crunching numbers to do the great job of helping us understand it in layman's terms. Cameron, firstly, how's today been?
Oh, it's been busy. I've got some lovely feedback from a few sort of characters out there that disagree with my assessment of the budget being about borrow and hope. So lovely emails to receive in an afternoon and evening.
Well, I think there's probably the blunt truth that people are trying to stomach, to be fair, Cameron, and thanks for someone like yourself that is actually there to be able to give us those hard, cold things to be able to swallow. So firstly, I really want to understand, the legislation around and fiscal responsibility that's in place for our finance minister to create such a slush fund in such a short amount of time. We heard that budgets are normally prepared in 6 weeks in advance. This was finished on Monday.
Yeah, and in fact today, they couldn't even give us all the detail in regard to what a lot of those announcements were. Apparently we're going to get them on May 22nd. So that just gives you an idea about how hurried some of the stuff has been. Now, look, to be fair, extraordinary times calls for an extraordinary policy response. And we've seen that. And they did need to go fast, and they did need to go hard. My concern out of this is that I think strategically they're making the right move, leaning off the government balance sheet. There's going to be a debt problem down the track, but we'll deal with that down the track. My real concern here at the moment in regard to whether it's turning into a little bit like a confetti style budget, because the money just seems to be flying out the door, and I'm not quite sure where all it's going, or whether it's going to be quality on the other side, because there's some big numbers floating around. The COVID response package is 62 odd billion. Now, about 40 billion of that has already been spent. There's about 20 billion left. On top of that, the budget package today was another 15 billion. Government debt, net debt, is going from about 65 billion to 200 billion in the next 4 years. Now, those numbers are absolutely eye-watering.
So, I mean, coming back to that, how are they able to present a budget and get it passed by all members of the House, or a majority of the House, without detail? I mean, it seems to me so irresponsible.
Well, there is. We got the bigger picture detail. So we know that there was the wage subsidy scheme was 3.2 billion. There's about $1 billion to create jobs, and the environmental side of things is we can go through, with reasonable accuracy, a lot of the stuff. And then credit where credit due. New Zealand's actually pretty transparent in regard to what takes place, because the public demands that transparency. And look, my personal view is that the government is doing the right thing by borrowing and borrowing big to try to insulate New Zealand from what is last time we had this sort of event was the 1930s. It's way worse than the GFC. It's way worse than the Asian crisis. So yes, we're throwing money out the door. We're putting it on the credit card. We're loading up the checkbook, loading up the credit card. But someone's going to pay for this on the other side, and it's going to be the next generation of taxpayers.
Okay, so what has been some of those things that you've been critiqued for saying today across the news? Well, that people aren't liking, that people aren't really liking.
So if I have a look at what I really wanted to see in today's budget, was not just a big package. Right, we got the big package. We saw the extension of the wage subsidy scheme. They're going to be investing more in infrastructure, 400 billion to tourism to help them out. They're pulling all those levers. What I also wanted to see in this budget was, I guess, a little bit more strategy, a little bit more of a plan, a narrative, a story around where New Zealand is going. Now, to be fair, it's pretty hard to create that narrative or that story when things are evolving by the day and there's so much uncertainty over COVID. But I still think we needed something to give New Zealanders a bit of an idea about what that reset, that rebuild that the government is talking about. Well, what does it actually look like in reality? What we got today was a whole lot of numbers, some real big spending, but not a controlled narrative in regard to what that plan actually looks like.
Yeah, excuse me, and what the new New Zealand will look like, and some vision for us and what we can stand behind being proud of. Now, I'm also really concerned as well about James Shaw's language, which surprised me from him. Excuse me. That we have this is his words from Jack Tame's budget special, we have a very narrow range of tax take in this country, so everyone who benefits from this recovery must pay for it. It's not a hell of an incentive, especially to the primary sector who want to be that light that pulls us through the recovery.
Well, the agriculture sector is still the backbone in New Zealand, so they're going to be pretty damned important on the other side. You'd hope we'd be pulling more levers, looking at trying to get more growth out of agriculture as well. Maybe there's some selective opportunities in manufacturing. Going back to what James said, do we have a narrow tax base? Well, the answer is yes. If we started from square one, we probably wouldn't have the one we've got. The one we've got is actually reasonably good compared to other jurisdictions around the globe. But if we start with a blank canvas, we would make some changes. But I think he highlights an interesting point, which was not in the budget today, is that someone's going to pay. If we load up the balance sheet, so government debt goes to 55% of GDP, and nominal amount of debt out there is 200 billion. In the next 12 months, the government is going to be borrowing 60 billion. That's more than $1 billion a week. So the numbers are absolutely massive. Now, at some stage, a couple of years out, we're going to have to get those numbers back down. And we can do it in a number of ways. Look, way one is to go more stringent in regard to spending. Now, I don't think the incumbents are going to be too keen on that route. The option two is to get the economy really fired up. If we can get the economy really fired up, strong economy means people paying tax, then we pay down the debt through that channel. Have we got a plan yet to really get the economy fired up? It's absent. The other final choice is that tax rates go up. You wouldn't be saying you're going to be putting up tax rates in an election year. But if I look towards 2021, watch out.
Oh, absolutely, totally, and then that was made as a comment as well as by Simon Bridges that, you know, watch out, the kindness will disappear from this government going into the next term. On those levers and what the Treasury and the Reserve Bank are doing and could do more, the response committee meeting that you opened, and there were several other independent economists on there as well, had differing opinions around what if a negative OCR was actually palatable or not. What's your thoughts on that?
No, I'm not a big believer in negative interest rates. In fact, I think it's sort of Humpty Dumpty economics. You know, it hasn't exactly worked in Japan. It hasn't worked in Europe. You know, there's a real fine line here because, you know, interest rates and financial instruments, if they're left unchecked, give you an idea about the balance between risk versus return. As soon as you start seeing central banks, governments interfering in markets, you interfere with what's called the process of price discovery. Markets do not accurately reflect the value of the instrument that you are buying. And if I have a look at in New Zealand at the moment, the Reserve Bank's stepping up to the plate and they're buying a lot of bonds. You know, they're keeping them lower, interest rates lower than what would otherwise be the case. Now that's a good thing in regard to keeping interest rates low, but what it is also doing, and we're seeing in an awful lot of other jurisdictions around the globe, you're distorting the price of the instrument. It does not accurately reflect what the value is, I think, of that asset. Now you can do that temporarily, but I'll be really worried about doing that for an extended period.
And the market's reflecting that with, of course, the New Zealand dollar, which is hopefully going to be able to buffer some of this for our exports.
Yeah, well, the New Zealand dollar has come down a little bit of late, and it's on in what you call the more exporter-friendly zone. And generally speaking, when it's up in excess of 65 cents, that's the exporter-unfriendly zone and the importer-friendly zone. Sort of around, you know, the mid-60s, both are pretty happy. As soon as you sort of get down below 65 cents and with a 5 in front of it, well, that's export-friendly and it's importer-unfriendly.
Yeah, absolutely. And but the thing is, at the same time, it's just a true reflection of how our markets are not in a good position, which we need them to be. And there's a lot of worry around the state of the US and the UK, our major markets, as well, to be able to bounce back.
Well, currency is a two-sided coin, right? And quite often the New Zealand dollar can be high because it's got nothing to do with us. It's got everything to do with the US dollar. Yeah, I can remember the New Zealand dollar got down to 40 cents. Had nothing to do with us. It had everything to do with the technology bubble we had right back in 1999 and 2000, and the US dollar was the only game in town. Yeah, what do we know? The New Zealand dollar of late is trading off a risk aversion theme. So if risk sentiment is good, i.e. equities are going up, then the New Zealand dollar tends to go with it. If you see equity market sentiment start to wane or risk appetite start to look a little bit flaky, then the New Zealand dollar as a risk-based currency tends to come down on the other side. Now, the good news with that is that it's exporter-friendly. The bad news is if risk appetites are looking a bit frail, it's not telling you a great signal about the global economy. And what we also know is that when the global economy is soft, commodity prices tend to go down, not up.
Yeah, and on that, Fonterra on the 1st of June is set for their forecast. ANZ's come out dropping it another 70 cents. What's your thoughts?
Well, at the moment, I'm in the low sixes. My concern is it ends up with something in the 5 in front of it. You know, I've actually been really surprised at how well GDT prices have held up over the past 2 to 3 months, given what we've seen around the globe. But if we see the global economy continue to look shaky, and particularly the consumer in the back half of 2020, then you've got a recipe for those prices to continue to slide. The good news story is that the New Zealand dollar is moving down with it on the other side as a bit of a buffer.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to talk about the going into this election 4 months away, and having this earmarked spend pre-election. To me, saw Simon Bridges sounding very politicking today. It's like the election campaigning already beginning, yet unable to come up with a solution in the details what National would have done. How do you think this next 4 months is going to play out around economic recovery between the two major parties?
Well, the only certainty out there at the moment is uncertainty. So I'd be pretty wary if I was a political party, trying to come up to the table with absolute clarity, because in all honesty, no one really knows. But what we do know at this juncture is that I think both parties are in broad agreement that yes, we need to be leaning off the government balance sheet. The right response is to be borrowing more, putting money into the economy in the form of wage subsidies, infrastructure investment. Both sides of the political arena seem to have a degree of commonality in that. Now, there might be differences over exactly how much one wants to spend versus the other, but both political parties would be borrowing a bucket load of money right here and now to channel into the economy to support it. Now, I guess we're going to have to start to make a bit of a choice at some stage as we realise there's no free lunch. The more money we borrow today, the more that is a liability on the taxpayer of tomorrow. The big concern I have at the moment is not about the use of fiscal policy or borrowing. It's potentially where the money is ending up and whether we're seeing value.
A return on investment.
Is stuff actually going to create jobs? Is the infrastructure investment on these so-called shovel-ready projects, are they going to deliver a more productive economy, or we're going to start to see some interesting projects that you sort of scratch your heads over, i.e. the likes of, they accelerate Ports of Auckland's shift north, when really, if you look at the numbers, it should be going south.
Yeah, absolutely. So to close, Cameron, because I'll tell you what, the numbers are through the roof in terms of people watching, yet they're just sitting there so transfixed on all this amazing information. They're not throwing comments out like they normally do. So just to close, what would be your advice to the primary sector amongst all of this massive fiscal policy injection?
Well, get a smile on your face at the moment, because the biggest issue around New Zealand at the moment is cash flow. And the rural sector's got it. For an awful lot of businesses that have been non-operational, think about a tourist operator. The cash flow hasn't gone down 30%, 50%. If you're an international operator, the cash flow line has gone to zero. And odds are it's going to be zero for a long time. If you're a domestic operator, same sort of thing. Retailer, okay, level 2, some people are going back into the shop, but I think it's going to take a long time before that sales line gets back to where it was pre-COVID. Now, we know across the rural sector, there's still some issues. The dairy sector's got too much debt. So if you've got available cash flow, try to pay down the debt. Work with the bank. The banks are, I hear bad stories and I hear good stories as well, but generally speaking, I think it's the most, everybody's sort of, one team, one dream. If we get the farmers and the banks sort of working together, we'll come out of this the other side. From a bank's perspective, the rural sector's got cash flow. It's going to be the sectors that don't have cash flow over the coming 12 months that are going to get the most attention out of the banks.
Yeah, actually, all of a sudden, they've just started pouring in the comments. You see, all they need is a wee poke and a nudge. Paul Harris wants to know, Cam, about, golly gosh, they're all moving. How do we get the banks to get an appetite for rural debt again? The price is great, but the rural lending's very low.
Well, it depends which part of rural lending you're talking about.
And I have heard a lot of swing of appetite in some of those banks that were going to be the saviour as well, now running away from touching rural debt.
Well, all the banks in the lead up to COVID were running away from the dairy sector, or at least shutting things down, didn't have any appetite for new customers, would look after their existing customers. The sector's got $41 billion worth of debt. It's 2/3 of total agriculture debt, and about 60% of that dairy debt is interest only. That's a problem. They need to be paying principal. The sector needs to deleverage. Dairy sector debt probably needs to go to 30 to 35 billion. It's not going to happen overnight, but it's probably going to need new capital. If I have a look at what we're seeing in other parts of agriculture, we were still seeing positive lending growth in the last 12 months up until COVID. Now, obviously, what's happened post-COVID is that the banks are still lending, but I guess the
criteria has changed.
They're asking more questions, right? Because it's a different risk environment. Doesn't matter. You go into the bank tomorrow and go ask about getting a mortgage, which is normally the easiest game in town to do in regard to getting a loan. You don't have to tick too many boxes. Well, now you've got to tick a few more boxes because, hey, presto, you might not have a job. So it's a different economic environment. Good deals will still get done. Bad deals, a lot more difficult to push through.
Yes.
Or even mediocre deals.
Yeah, absolutely. No, there's a lot of compliments here saying thank you so much, Cameron, for being able to break this down for us, being user-friendly as always. So I won't take up any more of your time, sir. I know it's been a very big day. And as always, we really appreciate you joining us here on Sarah's Country. It's Cameron Bagri from Bagri Economics to end Sarah's Country's special edition budget special. So I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to join us. The numbers have been through the roof in terms of those joining us for the special edition. And if you want to listen back on podcast or recommend to anybody to listen on podcast on demand, search Sarah's Country, as well as you can watch on YouTube on Farmers Weekly. Search on YouTube to be able to watch those interviews back. We'll be back next week, Monday, and from 7 o'clock. Lots planned for next week. This show is developing with some very cool concepts that we're working on up our sleeve. So tonight, I want to say good night, go well, and even with the bleakest economic forecast in living memory, working to provide food and fibre has never been so needed. We need you, and we've got this.
This is Sarah's Country.